Okay, we have more people in the chat here. If you weren't here right at the beginning, the whole the whole point of today really is just to celebrate. This was Reth and Elia started. They went live on Web Novel exactly a year ago today, and in about an hour, we're gonna. I've interviewed my husband with you guys' questions and a few questions of my own, and I'm gonna because he is really the inspiration for this character. So we're gonna watch that together. But between now and then, I've got some giveaways to do, and I'm just happy just to either answer questions or talk about the book or this story. Did anybody who's here now, and you can put it in the text if that's easier for you than talking, anybody have any questions or anything that they wanted me to talk about now that we're a year down the line? Well, I'll tell you all, for me, this year, I mean, I know that I've told you before that it's really special to me how much you guys love this story and love these characters. But it's actually been really cool since Beast finished and everybody's moving over to Queen and getting into that story. It's been really special to me to have people recognizing and enjoying the development of the characters as they're older. Because for me, right from the beginning, I've known Reth as an older man, because I had to kind of understand the whole story. Obviously, only not in detail, but I had an already knew by the time we were a few weeks in. I already knew that they were going to have Elrith, and I already knew she was going to be the next alpha. Um, so I had already kind of seen and known what kind of man he was growing into right from the beginning. And it's been really touching for me how everybody is enjoying him in Elris's story as an older man and coming along for that ride, because I wasn't sure how many people would be like, "Oh, who cares? He's 50 now," you know. But I adore him even more, I think, as he's older. But anyway, so Liz said, "How long ago were the Guardians established for Reth's world?" So the way that I had it in my head, all the way back when the prophecy was originally given, and the I guess the decision was made on how they were going to handle that, which was to separate and not educate, like basically that there was going to be a chosen ignorance for what was going on with the disformed and stuff like that. Um, there was at the same time some tensions with the humans, but not as badly as they have now in the future years that we're seeing. So the decision was made that the humans would no longer be a tribe in anima, that they would be allies. The ones that know of the anima would return to the human world and they would be allies. Um, and there was a specific family or bloodline that was chosen to kind of be the watch guards for making sure that other humans didn't come to know about, basically that they would sit as watchmen on the other side of the traverse, and hopefully have a role in stopping or working against what the prophecy entailed. Um, so this happened. I think again, I'd have to look at my notes. I think it was about 800 years ago, or maybe it's more. I'm not sure. It was hundreds of years ago anyway that the Guardians were established, and the idea behind the curse was that they would make a vow and a commitment, that would, because they knew or they anticipated that over time, obviously new generations of humans would be born and would take up this mantle of protection, but they would never have been in anima. And there was concern that they would, if they were to be able to travel back and forth, that they would want to stay and they would become potentially part of the prophecy problem. So they made a commitment, and any person who is sort of written into guardianship, actual guardianship. So being a part of the bloodline isn't enough. You have to be identified as a person who has the integrity and the desire to protect these people, this world. So when you get sworn in, so to speak, you give this vow, and the vow does it's a curse. It gives you over. If you are to step into the traverse, you are automatically given to the voices. So that was the what do you call it? I guess the disincentive for the guardians to ever sort of shift their loyalties and decide to head on over themselves. Um, so that's why, because that's something that people have been asking me questions about lately. Rachel said, "What would you have done differently now that you can look back?" Um, I don't think there's anything I would have done differently on a major. Like, I think all the same major plot points and stuff would be there. There's a couple of places that I would reduce. Like, I wouldn't have Elia gone as long as she is in terms of the story itself. It's a little bit easier for readers now because the book is completed. They don't have to wait all those. Well, I think you guys were like 2 months or more with them separated. And that was really hard. And that taught me a lesson about the difference between while the book is ongoing and when somebody can read it later. Because obviously, for me as a writer, those things all happen together. Um, so, yeah, I probably would have reduced the amount of page time that Elia was separated from Reth. Um, I'm trying to think. I know that there's other things, like other small things that I've thought later on and gone, I wish I'd done that differently. But I honestly can't remember what they are. If I think of more, I'll let you know. Um, Janelle asked, do the anima have a holy book and how do they cultivate their faith? So they don't have a specific book, but they do have prophecies, and those prophecies are predominantly passed verbally, but they are written down. They do have the histories that make the historic interactions of things that happened in the past that the creator was involved in very clear. But honestly, their faith is cultivated by they have a much better awareness, I think, of creation itself. Like for them, they live in a world that isn't modernized, so they're much more attached to and aware of things that occur that they don't have anything to do with, cycles and seasons and growth, and they know how to cultivate creation, but they're, I think, much more connected to the understanding that so much happens in the world that they don't control, that it makes them more aware of the creator's power. But also it's a lot to do with how any family or parent, or family group or pack or tribe or herd, how they pass it on. So like I said, most of it is passed on verbally and in the way that they live. So there's some tribes and some clans and some packs that have a very deep faith and others that don't. So for the likes of Suli, I think that was actually one thing that I wished I'd expanded on more. Her whole thing of being having the white hood and being a servant. There's a whole thing behind that I never really got into, and I meant for it to come up later when she kind of steps away from it. But at the time in the story and the way that happened, they ended up getting their moment a lot later than I expected. So it really wasn't the time to introduce this whole new arena. But things like that. So she, in part, chose servitude because um, she didn't find the same joy and the same fulfillment out of relationships that a lot of other people did. So part of her willingness to serve was because she found a great deal more satisfaction in that than in sort of pursuing the normal, find a mate, have a family thing. Um, but also, she was raised in faith, and it was a strong component. And then also, she had the relationships with Baron and Reth as she was growing up. and training and stuff. So she was influenced a great deal by people that were strong in their faith. So for her, choosing servitude was kind of half spiritual and half practical. And always something that she was very wise about and very thoughtful about. And she really had a true faith. But I would say that for the anima in general, that the spiritual side of their nature, it just kind of comes naturally to them. They don't question the existence of a creator. They would be more likely to question his involvement or in sort of intimacy with them. I don't know. I can't think of any characters I created that didn't believe in the creator at all, but there were plenty who didn't really care, who just, go on and live their lives and do their thing. Um, where do you get your inspiration for such a truly awesome place? Well, I have to thank the creator for that one. Where does any of us get an idea? I can tell you that I've read books that had worlds that I wished I could live in. And so a lot of what I did with anima was just create a world I wished I could live in. It was just a world I wished was real. I've always loved mountains and forests and beaches and just being out in nature. I've always loved that. I've always loved the quietness of it and the lack of bustle and noise and stress. I find it extremely relaxing. So, living in a world that had no real technology and was surrounded by beauty just appealed to me. And then the people and having them be able to shape shift and stuff, that came out of when my editor at the time first said to me, I think you should go fantasy. And I was like, do you have any? She's like, honestly, just do whatever you want. And the thing that I had always wanted to do, that I didn't think I had the writing chops for, to be quite honest. I'm a huge fan of Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorn and Roses series, especially the first four books. Um, I should say only the first four books because I didn't like the fifth one, but such is life. And there was two things about that world. One was the different cultures and lands that were in it and how each differed and had its own, um, I guess, focuses and intentions, which I loved. I thought that was really creative. But then also, that series has a male character, a male lead character in it, that for me is the best and most wonderful male lead I've ever read. And I didn't want to recreate him, but I wanted to create a character that gave me the same feeling that that character did. And it was one where he was extremely protective, he was extremely strong, but he was also humble, and he didn't marginalize others. So even though he was so strong, he sort of humbled himself and kept his true power under wraps to allow others to bloom, and also to use in protection of others too, so that his enemies would sort of underestimate him a little bit. And there was a really awesome dynamic between him and the female lead where he wanted her strong. And so, yes, he would stand close and he would be protective, but he wouldn't do everything. He would let her meet challenges and he would let her make decisions. Even when it freaked him out, he would do it because he knew that he trusted her and he wanted to see her grow. And I just thought it was this really amazing dynamic between the two of them, and I wanted to do something like that. And Reth and Elia are what came of it. Um, Taught to you. Does Elia ever share what the voices said to her? I had intended to bring that through. I think there's some discussion of it in Queen. But no, she definitely doesn't ever actually get into the depth of that. I think she mentions it a little bit, or if you read the narration towards the end, but I know that those events were pretty stressful, so probably blew past most people. There was some stuff where she kind of implied what the things were that had come up for her with the voices. Um, and I think it comes up again in Queen. I know I've written something of it, but it wasn't like she doesn't give an account of it.
Was
Um,
it her dreams?
no, no. For her, it was a combination of playing on her fear of losing Reth, um, and in a, I guess, a don't want to say a prophecy because it's so what the voices do is they play on your fears and they play on your desires, right? So if they can't tempt you, if they can't offer you something that will make you turn, which is what they usually try first, then they'll threaten, right? And with Elia, it was very clear that she was never going to fall for the kind of, she didn't. Basically, the only thing that they could offer her, she already had, which was Reth. That was the thing that would have sort of pulled her attention. So instead, they threatened her future and the future of her children, and they basically led her to believe that if she didn't, or wanted her to believe that if she didn't do as they were saying, she was going to lose them all. Um, so I don't want to get into too much detail on that because I think it's still going to come up some more. But this is part and parcel for her with the difficulty and the fear of letting Gar into this whole scenario, um, and also Elrith's leadership and why she never, even though she always knew Elrith was going to lead, she was never pushing it. She was basically going to accept it when it happened. She was never going to try and be active in making it come to fruition because she knew that it was going to put her family in positions that she really, on a personal level, didn't want them to be in. So that was kind of the things that they toyed with her about. And Erica asks, what did the voices say to Reth? Reth was a hard one for them. He was, when he first crossed, I'm trying to remember. So when he was a child, it wasn't so bad for him, because he was very, what do you call it? Um, Idealistic. So, and also, as you've probably observed about him if you've read the book, he can be a little bit oblivious and a little bit optimistic at times without really giving a lot of thought to the implications. So, when he was a child, he was pretty bulletproof. It was scary for him, and that they played on that. They frightened him, but they weren't really able to get in his head as a kid. Where they tried to get in his head when he went back across in his late teens, it was a combination of, and part of the reason it influenced what happened when he went back and saw Elia with the other guy, because he wasn't sure what was going on there. He was still kind of in denial a little bit, but he had a sense. So there was some, there was some attempting to tempt him away from her, which he wasn't super excited about. And then again with the threatening, or the trying to make him feel like basically that having her was going to be a disaster for him. And so when he found her and then found her with somebody else, it was really easy. They had gotten in his head enough that it was easy for him to believe that it was never going to work. Um, but he is such a guy, and this is why it's the same for Gar. Reth is so certain about what's right that he's actually very hard to shake on that. So the voices don't get a lot of traction with him. It's not that it's easy, and it's not that he can just breeze through, but he doesn't have a lot of the weaknesses. Like, he doesn't have the kind of weaknesses that Gari has. they can really play on Gari's fear, and they can really play on his self doubt. Reth didn't really suffer that so much as a young man. So there was just a lot less for them to play with. Astro said she's super curious about the White Hood. So the White Hood was just a symbol. Any anima that had chosen, we would consider it something like taking a religious vow, but it's not quite as strict. So what it means when an anima chooses to wear the white hood, they're devoting themselves to service. So that means if you are anywhere at any time in anima and you need help, you can find one of these people and they will help you. If they can't physically do it themselves, they'll go find somebody who can. Like they're basically making themselves servants of the people. And most of the time, that puts them in really humble positions. Most of the time, it means that they just help people. They do laundry. They go help with meals when there's a big event. They'll, offer their services or be asked to come help. They'll help healers. Basically, anywhere there's another set of hands needed, they'll come in and help. And if you're walking through the Tree City and your load is heavy and you see them, you can ask them and they'll help you. So really, it's just about offering themselves, being unselfish with their time. Um, but there is the belief underlying it that the reason they do this and the reason they choose it is because they believe that that's the role the creator plays for them. And so it's like an offering, it's like a spiritual offering. I will give this in recognition of what you've given to me. That's the sort of spiritual aspect of it. And Suli was already suited, like her personality was already such that she was already suited to service anyway. And then between the things that happened to her and her deep faith, it all came together, and it was just right for her. Like she's just one of those people. And of all the characters actually in the story, she's the one that I admire the most. She has the biggest heart in terms of selflessness, which is what I think appeals to a lot of people about Reth. But Suli's actually even more selfless than Reth is. Suli will allow herself to be humbled and misunderstood, and she'll allow herself to be marginalized or dismissed, and she will not let it make her waver, which is why she was able to get where she could with Laren, because he was in such a messed up place that had she been a person who would get prideful and be like, well, screw you then, it never would have worked. He needed somebody who would basically take the emotional blows and not fall over and wait for him to get to the right place. And she's that person. She knew he was wrong. She never doubted that he was wrong in what he was doing. It was more that she was willing to give grace and wait and let him see that, or let him be ready to see it so that she could help him. Um, Amzer, if you're talking about, she said she saw him die. Elia comes out of the traverse and says, no, they can't kill him. They're not going to kill him, or something along those lines. Um, yes, there was an element of Reth in that, but it wasn't just Reth that she was talking about when she said that. Um, what was the hardest chapter to write emotionally? The hardest chapter was the one called Cold Home, which is when Reth goes back to the cave after Elia has left. And that is because that's the most despairing that Reth's ever been. When I got to the very end, and actually the threat was even greater then, I was also really close to the happy ending. So even though it was actually worse in terms of horror and despair for Reth, personally, I knew we were so close to the good stuff that it didn't hit me as hard. Cold Home hit me really hard. Um, and then on a personal level, excuse me, the scene where Elia is almost giving up. It's not that she's giving up entirely. She's not going to kill herself or anything, but she's at such a place of um, feeling like she can't cope with what's going on, and that's a place where I've been. So that one was really hard too, and it's actually not a very big scene. But that was really like that was very impactful for me to write her in that place. I couldn't give a lot of it because it was a very short scene, but it's just a place I've been, and so it was. I just knew what she was going through. There's a lot. I mean, there's so much that you guys never get to see because it would just take too long to put it all on the page. There's a lot of scenes that you've never seen that actually are super emotional for me. But yeah. Anyway, um, okay. At the end of the book, we left Sully being pregnant. Would her being disformed, would she have the same risk as Elia did giving birth to Anima if the baby shifts? Yes, that's always a risk. That's actually a risk anytime for any female in Anima, because there's different things that can affect their ability to shift, and like Elia hit, if your body gets to a certain point, you actually can't shift anymore if you get to within a certain sort of closeness to death. Or there can be mental barriers. There's all kinds of things. Anima have issues just like everybody else. Um, so yes, there's always a risk, and they've lost females that way. But also being disformed means there's a higher percentage of chance that her children will be disformed as well, which would mean it would be a quote unquote normal human birth. So they don't know until they get there whether she's at risk of that or not. Sorry, you get to listen to me drink. My throat's getting a little dry. Astra said I had a soft spot for Laren because he went through a self exploration, much like any of us grow through. Yes. And all the mistakes and choices lead us to good or bad. I have a huge soft spot for Laren for that reason. Even though I admire Reth and I love him, like I really adore his character, um, I relate to Laren, like for real. Um, and I know a lot of people got really mad at him for the choices he was making and the ways that he was thinking. But I just know from personal experience and also from dealing with other people going through hard life things, we can get blind to stuff, like our feelings can become so overwhelming that they actually change how we think, and the way that we're thinking and what we're seeing seems so clear and seems so true that we just like bowl into it. And that was where Laren was at. He was always a good guy. He was always an honorable male. He was always strong. But he was so blinded by grief and by bitterness about things that had happened and ways that people he cared about had been hurt, that he was blind to his own bias. And he was only seeing all of those things early on in the story, only seeing them from one perspective. He didn't start that way, which was why Reth sort of, earmarked him as a possible leader for the Lupines, because Reth could see in him that he was better than Lucan in terms of he wasn't quite so single-minded. But when he lost his father and his sister so quickly, and the wolves are even more family focused than the other tribes. So for him to become what they would term as a lone wolf at that young age is very rare, especially since his family was technically a larger family than usual. He'd lost his mother, his father, and his sister then by the time he's in his mid 20s. And that's not common in anima. So he's dealing with something that a lot of people don't have to deal with and don't know how to help him deal with. And then at the same time, there's this wider political conflict that his family was at the center of. So he was facing, he was just facing challenges that he really wasn't prepared for. And it wasn't until, like I say, Sully kind of broke through the trash, the alpha male BS, then he could start to see a little bit more clearly. but he was literally reluctant to to let himself see, because when you're in that place, a lot of the time your anger kind of feeds you a little bit, and your anger kind of fuels you. And I shouldn't think, I know, with Laren there was a lot to do with um like subconsciously not wanting to feel weak, because he had lost so much, and the idea of putting himself in a place where more could happen and more could go wrong. He was subconsciously trying to avoid that by not allowing himself to see the issues that were there until later. His family left him to deal with their crap. Yes, they did. And yes, that happens to a lot of us. We get, what do you call it? Set up for failure, and then we have to walk through it. Um, and that was what I felt like for Laren, was that, it was really unfair, a lot, especially as dad, a lot of the stuff that went on. Um, but I knew he had it in him to get to the right place. I was just hoping y'all wouldn't lose patience with him before he got there. I loved him in the end too, Sultan. I mean, to be fair, I always loved him because I knew what I was going to do with him. I knew what he was like at his core, and I knew that was going to come out. But I would get so aggravated sometimes when I knew I had to have him so resistant to what was right in front of his face. But I love him now. I love the last scenes with him and Suli, where he's just like completely past all the bitterness and stuff. I love those scenes. They were so much fun to write. Um, Liz asks, can the bears afford to be their own tribe because they have better fertility? I don't think that I really thought about their fertility, to be honest. Um, they are isolated and their own tribe because they have some beliefs that are different than the other tribes, and some just natural inclinations in terms of the animals that they are. Um, so the bears that I was able to be close to as a teenager, I was in the California forest working at summer camps, and I honestly don't remember which breed or species it was, but there were bears there, and these bears only ever lived in their family groups, and even then the kids would eventually leave the mom, and they were just very insular, and yes, they would be around each other and stuff, but whenever you would see them, it was usually just one or two of them. They were often alone, and so I guess for me that kind of fed into what I imagined the bears would be, which was a people who, yes, they are a tribe and they are connected, but they didn't want to be close to the other tribes. They didn't trust the other tribes because they think a little bit differently than the others do. They had this historic war in the not too distant past, that added to that. And even though Gower and Reth's relationship was a positive one, it was always, they liked each other. And as far as a bear and a lion would trust each other, they trusted each other, or at least they trusted each other's to be good people. But Gower just would never, like, you would never convince the bears to come live in the Tree City. It just wouldn't happen. That it's not the way they live. They're a nomadic, so they have summer places where they live, and they move for winter and hibernation and stuff. They also hibernate, which the other tribes don't do. Um, and they are vulnerable because of that. So they want to be secretive, you know. So yeah, there's just a lot involved in it. For me, at least in the way I was thinking about it, it didn't have to do with their fertility as much as their kind of culture of their species. Um, Janelle asked, "Will we will we see Laren and Sully and Queen?" I'm gonna say yes. That is the intention. Yes, you will, but um, we'll see because I haven't written it yet. um, Sully always saw his true heart. Yes, Sully recognized and actually recognized his true heart from a distance because she never knew him personally, but there was a combination of sort of she was very observant. She's the kind of person who very quiet, and when she would be in a room people wouldn't notice. This is part of the servitude thing, is they don't put themselves forward, and so they become in other people's eyes like a servant used to, where they just become part of what goes on around you, and they don't really get seen as people as much, is a sad way to say it. So she's very observant, partly because of her trauma and partly because that's the kind of person she is. And so she had observed him functioning and already had a fairly high opinion of him. But then when she heard Lucine talk about him as a brother and a leader in the pack and all of that, it was intimate insight into what she'd already observed about him. So she already, I mean, she tells him that right at the beginning. I think she says, you know, she has his brother, his sister had a high opinion of him. And that meant a lot to Sully because Sully could see the issues that Lucine had. Like she knew that Lucine was not uh, all good, but she also got to see the good side of Lucine. She got to see the side of Lucine that is protective of others and is thoughtful of others, because Lucine did see her as a person and a lot of people didn't. So Sully got to see a side of Lucine that you guys never got to see, that Laren also got to see of her, which was that when she cared about a person, she could be very fierce on their behalf and very protective. And she was that way with Sully. She took Sully on because she observed. She caught on very quickly to the challenges that Sully was facing with males. And so Lucine took her because her own power would then give a measure of protection to Sully, but also because Sully was a female in a predominantly male environment. Lucine wanted to bring her alongside and give her, you know, a sisterhood, so to speak. So Lucine, that was actually, there you go, Rachel. That's something that I wish I'd been able to do. I don't think the way the story was told I could have, but I wish that I could show you all the sides of Lucine that you didn't get to see. Because she looks all bad in the book because you only get to see the problems she causes. And she causes some serious problems. She does not make good decisions. Um, but there's some good sides to her. There's reasons why Laren loved her so much, and there's reasons why Sully was willing to serve her. So I wish you all had gotten to see that. Um, in California, brown bears and black bears. I can't remember which ones we were around. We were up in the mountains. I want to say they were black bears, but I really don't know. Was Lucine infected, or was that her true nature? She was infected at the end. She got it from her dad. Um, she was always she wasn't infected until um, the I believe the way that I set it up. She didn't give over to the voices until after she was banished. So after Reth um, chose Elia, that was like the final straw. She'd been wavering prior to that. She had, I mean, she's not all good, right? She's very ambitious, and very self-serving in that. Like, power is a thing for her. So, you know, wanting to be with Reth was more about wanting his power than it was about who he was as a person, but she did find him very attractive. Um, and enticing him that way and it was essentially an attempt to trap him into making sure that she was the queen. Um, because she couldn't, even though she thought she was going to win the right, she was ambitious enough that if there's another way to give herself an advantage, she's going to do it. And so at that time, in the lead up to the right, she hadn't given over to the voices, but she was leaning. She really wanted some stuff, and they were able to. There was an influence coming from her father and some of the other wolves around them that had also been influenced by that whole thing. So she was leaning into it. When she got banished, though, she got super bitter, and ambitious to the point of, I would say, if she'd lived, she would have gone the same route as her dad. She would have eventually lost her mind because she was so singularly focused. They would have just played havoc with her. So, it's actually a mercy for her that she died when she did because, it wasn't going to be pretty. Um, yes, Esther, she was very conflicted. Um, she wasn't like a sadist. Like, she's not the kind of person who enjoys the pain of others just for the sake of it. But she was very much, what do you say? Like a means to an end. She was cold enough that if it was going to ultimately be of benefit that she could see it, she could stomach it, if that makes sense. By the time she got to Elia, she was so personally jealous and bitter with Elia, and she had given over to the voices by that time. She was becoming sadistic. She wasn't sadistic in the sense of like, she wouldn't beat her guards just because she could. She wasn't that kind of person. But revenge, absolutely. And that was what she was doing with Elia when the time came. She would have, if she'd had the opportunity, she would have killed Elia's child. Absolutely. That was her goal. When it came down to the between the two of them, she wanted to remove any barrier. She wanted to lead, and she wanted to do it with Reth. She was going to do whatever it took. And she wasn't seeing clearly by that time. She was starting to already kind of tip over the edge of reality. So, is Knox still alive? He is, and unfortunately, I had intended to use him in Queen, um, and things just got away from me. The second volume of Queen panned out very differently than I'd originally intended. I thought you were going to see a lot more of the older characters coming in and sort of gathering and being part of the support network for Elrith before all this stuff kicked off. But when Hannah and Merrick came in and things took the direction that they did, it just went a lot faster in terms of the plot than I expected it to. I thought there was going to be more downtime. I thought there was going to be a slower development towards volume 3, but it really kind of came bang bang bang. And so I didn't get to develop Gwen the way I wanted to. I didn't get to bring Nox in. I didn't get to better explain how Gari and Callie are still connected and stuff like that. So a lot of that's going to come in volume 3, and you're going to see in volume 4, and you're going to see it all. You're going to still see it. You're going to see it in action. But I had thought that all of these things would sort of be shown up front. So Knox is still in the back of my head. He's somebody that I can use because he's still there, but I haven't been able to set him up, so he might not end up showing. We'll just have to wait and see. Was there any other questions? I can't believe how many people are here. You guys are awesome. Oh, I should be careful talking about Queen. Sorry, Astro, I didn't think about that. Yeah, if you haven't if you haven't finished King and started in Queen, sorry, you're getting a little bit of spoilers here. Um, oh, we have some new people. Um, I'm trying to think. I want to see because I've got about 20 minutes, so I need to take you, or I can change the. If there's no more questions, does anybody else have any questions? I don't want to cut anybody off. Okay. What I might do is I might take you over to see. So, for those of you who have gotten to the end of King, which I think is pretty much everybody except Astro, this isn't a story spoiler, Astro. This is a writing spoiler. Um, 10 chapters from the end, I had, or it's at the end of the actual story, the main plot. I wrote a chapter called The End, and it's actually not about Reth and Elia so much as me and my husband and the ways that my husband inspired the character of Reth and the way that our relationship inspired some of the interactions and the relationship that Reth has with Elia. Um, and I knew that you guys would get that, and I knew that it would work for you. Um, what's funny to well not so the thing that goes on with my husband is that he just doesn't obviously see himself that way, and so he gets kind of, I want to say, kind of squeamish about um, about the fact that I'm so open about this stuff, and also that I will just say that about him because he's obviously, as I mean, all of you who are either are in relationships or have been in relationships, nobody's perfect, right? Everybody has their issues and everybody has their weaknesses. Um, and so he very much focuses on his weaknesses and thinks that, nobody's interested to hear his him in relation to this story. Um, and there's no doubt that, when I wrote that chapter and when I talk about him, I'm focusing on the positive. I don't ever want to give the impression that he's this like perfect guy because I know it can be really easy to hear about people who are still in love and think, oh gosh, they've got it good. I mean, those of you who've been in it, you have to fight. You have to fight for a relationship to last and to work. You have to fight to stay in love. And when I say fight, I mean you have to fight for it, right? You have to protect it. And you have to make choices and you have to be self sacrificing and you have to put up with things from each other and you have to forgive. So I don't want to put rosy tinted glasses on this and say my husband's perfect and wonderful and never a day. No, we've had terrible, terrible times in our relationships. We've had very, very difficult and painful seasons. And our lives together have not been easy. So I don't want to pretend. I want to make sure that I'm not painting an unrealistic picture. But the reality is, just like with Laren, right? There can be a really good man at the core, and depending what's going on and depending where his head is at, you don't always get to see it, right? But I always get to see it. One thing that I love about my husband is that he shows me that side of himself, even if other people aren't getting to see it at the time. And one thing about him is that he's super. I mean, New Zealanders are blunt anyway, like they're very upfront, frank people. So they say a lot of things that Americans, for example, wouldn't say. They'll be honest about things that Americans wouldn't be honest about in social etiquette and stuff like that. Um, but one thing that I've always loved, even though he is very blunt and very open, you what you see is what you get with my husband always. Like he doesn't sugarcoat things and he doesn't pretend. And I love that. I've always appreciated that in people because I can be that way. I'm probably better at social etiquette than he is. But I've always preferred, I would rather deal with an open person who's very frank, even if it can be uncomfortable, than somebody who tells me what they think I want to hear. Even when I was young, I preferred the friend that would tell you the hard stuff over the person that would flatter you. I always have. So that's always appealed to me about him, but it doesn't appeal to everybody. So, um, you know, he's just very aware of his own weaknesses. And when I talk about stuff like this, it can make him very uncomfortable. And so when I interviewed him yesterday, um, and he's like, I want to see it before you put it out, right? So I interviewed him last night. I edited it this morning. I finished it, but he was at church while I was finishing it. And when he came home, I was like, "You need to watch this because I'm going in there in an hour, and if you don't want me to show it to people, I need to know." And so he sat down and watched it. He turned to me about halfway through. It's about 15 minutes long. He turned to me about halfway through and he goes, "Are you sure that they want to see this?" Because he's just convinced that, you know, basically because we're focusing on the positives, right? So the thing that I want to tell you all, if you see this, I hope that you will see him and you will appreciate him for the good man that he is, because he is a very good man. But I hope you'll also understand that that's not the only side of him. He knows that, and I know that. But I understand that when we're talking in this context, I'm focusing on the positives. And so I just, for his sake, and for yours. I don't want any of you to watch this and be like, oh, I wish I had a man like that in my life. He probably would drive you up the wall. I know very, very good men that I could never be married to, right? You've got to be the right person for each other. And yes, like Janelle said, he's still human. And so am I. And we joke about that, you'll see. Um, but yeah, that's the thing that makes him uncomfortable about all this. He doesn't understand why anybody would be interested to hear what he has to say. He knows that he's not this character. I know he's not this character. But what I did was I took the qualities that I love the most about my husband and I made them the the most forward qualities in Reth, if that makes sense. So, with all of that in mind, in a couple of minutes, I hope it's gonna work for me. Yes, it is. Okay, good. So I believe this link will work. Let me double check. Yes. Okay. I'm going to post this here in the text for voice. This is going to start playing in about 2 minutes. So if anybody wants to go get a drink or go to the bathroom or anything, if you want to see this, go ahead. This is a good time to do it. I'll also post it in the about the author, which is at the very top of the rooms and everything. So if you want to watch it later, if you don't want to watch it now, but you do think you want to watch it later, I'm putting it in the about the author chat room, which is just an announcements room. There's like no discussion that goes on in there. But you can go in there anytime and see it. But really, I asked him the questions that you guys asked me yesterday on Facebook and in here, and I asked him a couple other questions that I was curious about because we hadn't really talked about it. But yeah, you'll get to see him. He's actually very good at this stuff, but he is a little bit uncomfortable. So you'll get to see all of that. So head on over, go get your drinks or whatever, but head on over to YouTube. It's going to start, it says on my screen, in 60 seconds. So run, and I will see you there. Yes, he is a sweetheart. You guys can talk, by the way, if you want to. You don't have to stay on mute if you want to speak.
It was really great.
He's a sweetie. I
That
was
was
getting
good.
embarrassed. He thought I was mocking him. I was actually getting embarrassed. Well, not embarrassed, but yeah. It's hard. I find it really uncomfortable to listen to people compliment me, and he does it a lot. And usually if it's just us, I'm pretty good, but when I know other people are going to hear it, I don't know, it just makes me feel weird. Um, Somebody said you sound really different. Yeah, so apparently, according to Alan and my parents, not only do I sound different when I speak, because to them, to all of them, my New Zealand accent is normal, including my parents who are full American, right? I was born here, but we moved over there when I was 5. So I literally, most of my formative years were in New Zealand. And so all of them, my New Zealand accent sounds normal. So when we moved back here and they have to listen to me talk like this to other people, they get really uncomfortable. They don't like it. But Alan especially doesn't like it, and he says it's because my mannerisms change as well. He says I get a lot more expressive and a lot more exuberant in my gestures, and my voice is louder, and a bunch of different things. And I'm sure he's right because I didn't really make the connection, but America is much more uninhibited than New Zealand. And even though speaking in a New Zealand accent feels natural to me, when I'm speaking in American, I guess I don't know, it's hard to explain, but he says everything about me changes, and that's why he feels uncomfortable because he says it's like talking to a different person. And I think that's a little bit of an exaggeration. But he hates it. Like he can't listen to me if we go like to dinner with friends and we're there for 2 or 3 hours and I'm talking like an American the whole time. About halfway through, he'll start going, "Oh, I just hate this," because he feels like it's not really me. Something other than saving your soul. I know. I think so too, Astro. I don't. The struggle that I'm having for the new book is Erica says like he has two wives. Ooh, I don't know whether to laugh or swear. The the Demon Slayer book. So because it's a web novel, are instigating or are setting up a new app that is just for romance. It's not going to be like web novel in that not everyone can write for it. It's going to be curated and it's going to be specifically for the Western audience. And it's a great idea, and I'm really glad, and it's going to open up a lot of opportunities for us who get to put books on it. But what it means is, as you guys have probably all observed, the way books are titled and the covers that they use and stuff like that is very different on web novel than the sort of more Western style. And what we're being told right now is to kind of try to walk the line between the two so that the title and the imagery can work on both. My style is much more Western anyway. It's why my audience is smaller on web novel. So I don't really have to make any significant changes to my writing, but the title and the cover are proving to be a struggle. Um, so I think I have the cover figured out, but the title I'm still sitting on, and I'm not really sure because really for it to work on web novel, it needs to essentially tell you what the story is about. Um, but I prefer more conceptual titles. So I'm trying to think of some kind of verb, some kind of action word that will appeal to Westerners and touch into the romance, right? But at the same time, make it clear to anybody that this is a kick-ass Demon Slayer book. Um, so yeah, so I am open to suggestions and I am open um, to thoughts. But in the end, I mean, I don't like any of my titles. I'll be completely honest with you. I've never been good at titles to begin with, and these are even way far outside of my norm. So yeah, I can't really take my instincts about a title and apply them to this site. So yeah, still working on that one, and we got some time, so we'll see. We'll see what comes of it. But if anybody has any ideas, please feel free to DM me or post in the comments or whatever, because I'm
What
still
was
looking
the
for.
original title you had at first?
It was originally Saving the Demon Slayer, and
Oh.
then I was gonna shift to Saved by because the cover makes it look like the Demon Slayer is the guy, but he's not. He's the shield. The woman is the Demon Slayer. Um, so I kind of went back and forth because it's really about attracting new readers, right? It's about attracting people who haven't read my books before or haven't read this book before. So, because some of the comments I got from the couple people who kind of read ahead for me was that they really wanted to see, they want, from a romance perspective, they wanted the idea of a strong guy. And the cover makes it look like it's the guy who's the demon slayer, even though it's not. So, I don't know. Saving isn't ideal, but it's a word that on web novel will work because there's only certain words that will work as a as an action in a title on web novel. You know, you can't get too complicated. Um, so I'm still working on that one, romancing the demon slayer. See, part of me is like I like that, and the other part of me is like, nah, it doesn't sound like fraught with enough conflict. Demon love. He what? No, because I don't want them to think that they're gonna fall in love with demons, because it's the opposite of that. Um, what was it? Helen's. It was like, oh, he was joking though. He was like slays demons and hearts. He was just being stupid when he said that, but anyway, I have a couple more things to give away. One of them is very exciting and nobody knows about it. Um, I have a paperback of King of Beasts. So that's the first volume only. And be warned, it's in very small type because it's actually at least two, maybe three books worth of content. So I'm going to post this image in the thing for you guys so you can see because I need to draw your attention to the fact the only one that I have left has this little tiny um what oh it's gonna do this stupid thing where it decides that he's naked and I can't post it. That's hilarious. Wait a second, maybe it'll work this time. No, it doesn't want to do it. So the top of the cover, because this is a what they call a proof, it's not, yeah. So just so you know, Discord is telling me I can't post this because this picture of the paperback because it's explicit content, which I find really funny. Um, I'll see if I can find another image of it. So this cover has a little bit of a mess up on the very top. I'll see. Maybe it'll let me just post the top of it because it doesn't show his man boobies. So maybe it'll let me post that one. It's so funny because I have like not safe for work filters on my Discord. Yeah, it's gonna let me post that one. So I don't know if you can see because it has a white thing behind it. There's actually a line at the top of the cover that is white. The cover was obviously cut off center. Um, and here, I'll give you a better one. So I just want to warn you so you're not disappointed if you win this one that it's not as good. But it's the only one I have left. So if you want one, that's what you're gonna get. Um, and the type is really small. So if you have bad eyes, you might not enjoy it. Um, but anyway, what can I do for this one? Oh, that's right. I actually was looking at, yes. So I was gonna do the first commenter on the YouTube, but that was Rachel as well, and she's already won something. Sorry, Rachel. So the next commenter was Irish. So Irish, you get the paperback. Lucky you. You go, girl. Unless you've already got one. Have you already got one? Did you already win one before? I don't. Is she here? Oh, she hasn't come back. Okay. So I will double check. I don't think she has one. I don't think she's won it.
Tampons gave me yeast
Oh,
infections for 15 years. 50% of my life.
so sorry. That was YouTube suddenly deciding to start. Um, Enjoy. So I'm just gonna. There we go. So I also have a very. I'd like you all to say thank you to Erica. Erica is the one who's been helping me make t-shirts, and she has offered to send one of you a very unique, like, I love this. I'm going to get myself one because this is not it's an addition to what we normally have, right? So I don't know if you guys have seen, but we have the Love Team Beast shirts. So I'll just show you really fast a picture of those um, that we sell. But what Erica's offering to do is, in addition to the Love Team Beast, which is on the front, which is our normal shirts, she's also going to add uh, you as the team on the back. So this is the mock-up that she did that I liked so much that I've asked her to make it for me and I'm going to pay for it. So, because this is a really awesome prize, like I want one, um, I would like to do something unique to win it. And I do want to do it just for you ladies who showed up today. I should have warned the ladies that were leaving earlier. I should have told them so they could come back and be here as part of this. Anyway, so I have the list of ladies here. What I'd really love for you guys to do is to be entered for this shirt is to sometime today, anytime before midnight tonight, which is 10 hours or 9 hours from now. So whatever your time zone is in, anytime in the next 9 hours. Um, Can you post in the King of Beasts spoiler room either your favorite scene and why? It doesn't I don't I'm not looking for eloquence here. I'm not looking for you guys to be writers. This is just something that's fun for me as an author. So I'm using this to motivate you. Can you either tell me what your favorite scene is and why, or if there's something that was in the book that was resonated for you on like a real life level, like this happened in the story and that's happened to me, or this character did and said this, and my best friend was like that, or I don't know, just a way that it actually connected for you on like real life. Those are the stories that I love to hear. So just tell me what, either what you enjoyed or what connected for you and why. And what I'll do is when I get up in the morning, I will, and this is only for you guys. So I've taken a screenshot of who's here. And when I get up in the morning, I will go in and I will take a look, and I will have Alan look at him, and we'll decide. Or I might let him choose actually, because he doesn't know you, so he can't do favorites. So I'll let Alan choose, and whoever he chooses, I'll tag you so you know, and we will send you a T-shirt. So, does anybody else have any questions or anything before we go? Because I am going to have to get out of here in about 10 minutes at the latest. So, is there anything else anybody was wondering about or wanted to say?
Love your accent. It's so beautiful. Thank you for sharing it with us.
You're welcome. I would I would talk that way more often, but it really does cause problems for some people. They really can't understand it.
Hmm.
So I'm, uh, yeah, I just end up, it's just easier to to talk in my American accent. It is how I learned to speak. It's just not how I speak normally.
What comes more naturally to you?
The Kiwi accent now. I have to I mean both are natural in the sense that I'm not faking it, because I learned to talk in the American accent, and then I was still very young when we went to New Zealand, and I just picked it up. Like I didn't intentionally try. It just happened when I started school over there. My parents said about a month in, I came home and suddenly I was talking. Like they noticed it happening, but there was just, yeah, it only took a few weeks, they said, and I was talking like a New Zealander. Um, and that's how we talk at home. Like when I'm not thinking, that's how I talk, and that's how I think. When I read a book, I read it in a New Zealand accent, which sounds really weird, but it's true.
It's
Um,
fair. I read an American accent, so
yeah. Um, but yeah, so that's, oh, my son, his accent's kind of a mix, because he was 6 when we came back here, 6 or 7. So he was just a little bit older than I was. So Americans listen to him and think he sounds like a Kiwi, and Kiwis listen to him and think he sounds like an American. So he's kind of in the middle. Uh, oh, you're sweet, Jen. Thank you. Yeah, I was really glad that he was willing to do that, because he actually is a very private person. Um, and he really appreciates you all, and he appreciates the joy you bring me. Like he will sit at night when I'm like answering chat comments and stuff. Like I'm not really thinking about it. I'm on my phone or on my computer and I'm answering comments, and he'll go, "What are you grinning about? What's made you smile?" So he really appreciates what you guys do for me, and he really appreciates that, you're the reason why I can do this full time, and it's a job now. Like he values that. But on a personal level, he doesn't think people are interested in him, and he feels very uncomfortable with that. Um, but yeah, so that was why there was a couple times there I could tell he was getting kind of uncomfortable. But he looks like a deer in the headlights a couple times. Um, but yeah, when I asked him, he just immediately said sure. In fact, what I said was, "Do you want to film? Can I film you? Do you want to say something to my readers?" And he's like, "Why don't?" Because he was like, "Yeah, but," he's like, "Why don't you interview me, and then I'll know what to say?" Because he didn't know what to say. Um, Don't start with honey. Oh, excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that in the mic. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but what is your favorite or most memorable reader comment? Well, there's two that popped to mind that I can't share, but they touched me on a really personal level. But the first one that I would say I can share publicly that it always comes to mind when somebody asked me about this is that I had a husband of a woman contact me in November last year, and it was not a woman that I communicate with. Like, she's not a commenter. He got in touch with me on Facebook and said that his wife had been really loved the book, and he wanted to try and get something for her for Christmas. And this was before Eric had helped me do the t-shirts or anything. I didn't have anything. So I said, "Look, come back to me in December because I should have some stuff by then." And he's like, "Okay, sure." And then he comes back and he says, "Look, I have to tell you that I don't know." He's like, "I don't know what you write. I don't know what's in the book because I haven't read it." He says, "But whatever it is, my wife keeps calling me her true mate." And he says, and she's I can't remember how he phrased it because it wasn't the way I would phrase it, but he essentially said she's loving me openly is what he said. He goes, "So I don't know what that means, but I assume it means something to you." He goes, "And I just want to tell you that I appreciate that." So obviously something had changed in the way that she was communicating or something. And so I went back to him and I said, "Well, let me tell you what a true mate is." And I told him, and he was clearly touched. Like, she hadn't explained to him what that meant. And he says, "But that's really true. We really were created for each other." He was really excited about that. And it was just like the sweetest thing. Like, it was just a guy who was trying to be nice to his wife, trying to be thoughtful. And in turn, he ended up being like super nice to me because those are the moments, like, for me, it's worth that stuff's worth so much more than money. Do you know what I mean? When a person's life is changed or improved or in some way touched, like, that's worth everything to me. Like, nothing better than that. So yeah, I get comments relatively regularly from people who say, "This happened to me," or "I've been through this," or "This connected for me because, my mom went through that," or whatever. I love it when people talk about how the book feels real, like relates to their real life, because that's always my goal. Always. You can have fantasy and you can have unrealistic, wonderful things happening and unrealistic, horrible things happening. But the emotion, I always want the emotion to feel real, and I always want the characters to feel like real people. So when people say stuff like that, I feel like I've done my job and I feel like I've achieved what I was going for, and that is a really satisfying feeling. And then on top of that, when they're like Alan said in the video, when they are talking about it in the sense of it being a positive benefit in their life, like, that's the extreme. That's just awesome. So, yeah, and I honestly am really blessed. I get those comments regularly. I'm not going to say they come every day. They don't. But the deeper ones where people are like, "This really hit me," or "This really touched me." Those just always make me smile. And I can't tell you, because last year was a really hard year. I can't tell you the number of times I was having a terrible day, or I was really unhappy, or something was going on. I was exhausted, and I would need to do comments, like, I hadn't caught up on them all day, or I knew that there was a bunch there because it was a big chapter or something, and I would go in like feeling like, ugh, I better do this because otherwise it's going to be hanging over my head tomorrow. And somebody would have said something or commented in along those lines, and it completely lifted my spirits. Like, I can't even tell you. I've said it to people at different times. I'm like, "You have no idea how much I needed to hear that today," because there's just something, there's joy in hitting the bullseye. sometimes. And you don't even have to hit it for every person, right? You can hit it for 5 people or one person. Doesn't matter what the other 300 think. I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. What I mean is that's super valuable. So it's valuable whether other people agree or not, to me. So, yeah, those days are really special to me. Um, and yes, I agree, Jen. The timing I don't believe is a coincidence. I think that God gives me gifts and gives me little, it's like little cards of love. Don't give up. Like, oh, so Erica's saying it was so intense and I almost stopped reading and you told me to just hold on, it gets better. That's the feeling that I get on the opposite side, right? So I'm having a terrible day or I'm really tired or whatever, and then somebody sends me a nice comment or sends me a little private message, and I get that feeling of like, I can still do this. I don't have to give up. So when I'm cheering you on in the comments and saying, don't give up hope," it's a two-way street. Sravanthi. Oh, hey, Sravanthi. Hi. Um, when do we get to meet Cole? So the true answer is I don't know. I believe it will be in March, but I actually don't know. Um, so usually Sparity is the biggest competition that web novel run every year. Usually that opens in March. It could be early April, but there's also different things happening this year than happened last year. And the Sparity announcements for last year's competition are happening next week, at the end of next week. So whether they will, because they've given us no information. Normally they give us information in January, and they've given us none this year. So whether they're going to announce the new competition and open the new competition when the old one is finished, or whether that's going to push everything out by a few weeks, I don't know. I would say you can pretty much guarantee you're going to see him by April, and maybe a lot sooner. I really genuinely don't know because they don't tell us when they're launching Sparity because they know everybody will just overload the system and the servers start freaking out and it gets really bad. So, sometime in the next couple months, you'll meet Cole. If you all who are here hadn't seen him already, I will give you a little taste because he's a lovely, lovely man. Where are we? Sorry, I'm gonna get there. I wasn't thinking about doing this. This is my demon slayer. Oh, here we go. This is Cole, and he will be on his way to you
Oh my
sometime in the
god.
next couple
Oh,
months. He's a honey. He's a little bit different though. He's a um, gruff exterior type. He's not a sugar coater, and he can be very sweet and very thoughtful. But again, you're really only going to see that behind closed doors. He's a hard ass and very strong, probably a little too strong. So he has a lady friend that has to be very very strong in order to match him, or rather, he would say she's stronger than him. But anyway, I'm excited for you guys to meet these two because I think they're going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, it's a pretty intense setup, this story, and a little darker than Beast and Queen. Um, yeah, I don't know. We'll see. As we get closer, if we get more information, I'll definitely let you guys know. But right now, I just have a few days here and there that I can write these two, and other than that, I'm just waiting to see what the competition setup is, whether I have to make any changes and stuff like that. Shielding the Demon Slayer. I think we're getting closer. The the only thing I'm not sure about that because that is actually that's relevant to the story, but I'm not sure that it would work for people who haven't read any of it. I don't know. I'll give that some thought. I will add that to my list because I'm not saying no. Um,
Have they announced the werewolf competition?
no, that got put off to the end of February, which was not fun to hear. um, but yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. I really don't know what what's going to happen with that. I don't know. I do know that they ran that competition with the intention of um, with this new app that they're going to launch. I think in April. I think that's when they're going to do it as an official launch. It's in beta right now, so it's really just a replica of web novel right now in terms of its content. But um, I believe their goal is to have it live in April. And my understanding is that part of the werewolf competition was to identify some books and some authors um, to be a part of the launch for the new app. So we'll see if that comes to fruition or not. They've given us very little information. And I understand why, because every time they give us any information, we start asking for more. And they can't give us more usually. So I think they just keep quiet a lot because otherwise it just becomes this endless circle of questions. Um, yeah, so the new app, to my knowledge, will not have comics or anything else. It's just romance novels. Um, and it's specifically for the Western audience. But with that said, I don't know if they're going to make the changes they need to make. I don't know. I don't know because I don't know. Right now, the only thing that I know for certain that they're changing is covers. I know for certain they're doing, over time, they're going to give all of the books photo real covers rather than illustrated covers. Um, I am making notes, ladies, of these words that you're using so that I can think on them and play with them and stuff because these are good ideas. Um, the so because this new app is specifically for the Western audience, it's going to have a curated content. It's going to be the same books, at least when it starts. It's going to be the same books that are on web novel, but only ones that they've selected. It's not going to be everything, and no author is going to be like right now. Anyone can walk into web novel and start publishing. You won't get paid, but anyone can start publishing. Um, but it's not going to be like that. The new app is going to be editor approval only. Um, so I don't know whether they're going to sort of bank on the fact that they know how to market well and just continue to use the same titles and stuff, or whether they're going to end up switching up titles and things too. I don't know. But um, when and if that comes out, if you guys have feedback for web novel, they are very open, I have to say, when we give feedback. They don't always action it, but they do want to hear. And I know with you guys being readers, and you guys are the type of readers that they would be targeting, um, I know that they would be interested to hear from your perspective, how they could improve the experience in the new app. It is going to be a lot more streamlined and a lot more intuitive to use. It's not going to have as much in it as web novel has, so it's going to be a lot easier to find your way around. Um, yeah, so I know that their intentions are really good. We'll just have to wait and see what comes of
I
it.
I just have a question, right quick, on I see a lot of like publishers or authors on web novel, their works being pirated on other sites. Can web
Yes.
novel do something that is more restrictive or prohibitive for other apps to gather your hard work and you guys might get paid for it?
Well, there's two different things going on there. One is that some authors are not exclusive with web novels, so they are publishing their own works elsewhere and hopefully getting paid for it. But yes, there's pirating in general, and like even my traditional books got pirated. The difference was that it was less because my traditional books weren't, you know, big. They weren't bestsellers or anything. They didn't get a lot of attention, a lot of marketing. So there wasn't a huge market for them. Um, the pirating that goes on, we're as authors, we're in chat rooms with the web novel staff, and the top 25 authors are, this is a theme consistently. Um, the problem is in digital publishing, the material is available. And as long as the material is available, it can be stripped out. They can't stop devices that can transcribe from a screen. There's no way they can stop that. Um, they are pretty good. Like, they'll help us out. Like, if somebody puts the book up on Amazon, for example, because that's happened, they'll help us get it taken down. They give us a lot of advice, and there's certain things that, like, as the author, kind of we have to do, and then there's certain things that they can do. So they're pretty good about giving us instructions on how to, for example, contact Google and get Google to take results off front pages and stuff like that. But again, these are all things, these big organizations, they really don't care about an author with 15, 20,000 readers. Like, this, just Google does not care about Amy Lynn. So yeah, if I go through the process, they'll kick the result for the pirated site down a few, and so it's not the first thing that readers see. But beyond that, the algorithms do everything, and you know these pirate sites get a lot of traffic. So there's it's unfortunate, and I get that it is, the seven-headed beast. It just never stops. But yeah. So I don't know. We have asked both for pirating and for botting that they do some work on that for the new app. But honestly, I think it's less of an issue. I'm not saying it's not an issue. I think it's less of an issue in the Western audience, because there's a cultural difference. And it's still a big problem. Don't get me wrong. In the Western audience, it's still a big problem. But the people that are driving that, they're not going to stop. They're not going to change. So what we have to do is get creative about ways that we can um, have earnings or whatever that aren't just purely, this content goes out every day and they can copy it. That's part of the reason why web novel is so focused on privilege. And I know that that's not the best system, but it is part of the reason why we get warned not to drop our books out of the privilege system. I've done it with one anyway, but um, because that content is harder to access, so pirate algorithms and stuff can't access it. Right? It would have to be a person actually physically going in and paying for the book in order for it to be accessed. Whereas the normal unlocked chapters, apparently they can strip those out really easy. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that, but that's just the world we live in these days, honestly. So
Well, what happens when your book is completed and it's all right there to be opened?
that relies on people like you not going and looking for it for free in the
Mm.
end. Because the way the pirate sites work, and I've been through this and I've talked to other authors who've been through it, you find a pirate site that has it. If it's a pirate site that gets a lot of traffic, you contact them. Maybe they take it down, maybe they don't. But what they do to get around kind of the legal side of it, you contact them, and part of it's called a DMCA, and part of that is giving them a link. This is your thing that you've got. Here's your link. And here's my legitimate link where this material is available behind a paywall and you shouldn't be copying it. And they go, "Oh, okay, you're right. Sorry." They take the link down. And you click the link and it no longer works. And you go, "Wonderful." Well, then you go back, the next day and they've got it still there. It's just on a different link now. So all they had to do was change a little thing, and now you have to go through the whole process again. And it's literally endless. I know one author who was doing this several times a week for a month, and all they did was change the link every time. And because by changing the link, they're technically, um, I guess what my understanding is one of them actually talked to an administrator at one of the pirate sites. And I guess what's actually happening is they take the link down, but when the algorithm that they use, or the software that they use that goes out and gathers all of this stuff every day, when it goes back out, it looks for it, and when, because it's new, it just creates a new link for it and puts it back up. So it doesn't use the old link because the old link is now, dead. So it just creates a new one, and it's still under their domain, but it's a new, there's a new number in it or whatever. Um, so yeah. And as you can imagine, people that are making money off of content they didn't pay for, they're not super motivated to not do that. So the more popular your book is, the more it's going to get pirated. I'm blessed that the bulk of the pirating in terms of readers isn't romance. Most readers that are actively out looking for pirated content are on the male lead side. So there's one or two large pirating sites where my books are up, um, but they get very little traffic. So I'm happy for it to be that way. Which is why I don't talk about pirating very much, and I don't give the names of the sites and stuff like that, because people they don't understand how much work goes into this. I can't tell you the only times I've ever been, I would say, short with readers, or in any way kind of um, firm, is the people who come on and say, you need to finish this or you need to do this. We're your readers, and it doesn't matter if you're not making any money. It's your job. You started it. You need to finish it. And
Wow.
and I go back and I'll say, sorry that, there's a delay, but I'm curious whether you would expect to work for free. Because for me, these books take upwards of an hour per chapter just to write it, and that does not include all of the proofing and administration and managing the chapter uploads and doing the comments and all of that stuff. So just for the writing, you're looking at hours per day, every day. And you want to tell me that I should do that for free. Because that's what they're, privilege sucks. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And da 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 da. And I can't believe you do this. And I'm like, please understand, you don't have to buy privilege. You really genuinely don't. You will get the same content. You just get it later. That's the only difference. You get it later. And I think a lot of people don't understand that about privilege. They think that those chapters are locked behind this wall, and unless you buy privilege, you'll never read them. And it's not the case. All of the chapters filter through. They're just our pre-published material. Um, so when people say to me, you have basically you should be ashamed of yourself if you don't do this, then I'll say, okay, well, you go work for free for 50 hours a week and tell me how you feel at the end of it. Because I think people don't understand that. They think that you're just, sitting behind your computer having a little bit of fun and somebody's paying you for it. It's not. This is a job. This is a real job with real stress and real deadlines and real time. At least it is for me, especially because I do more than one book. So yeah, there are authors out there that are only working an hour or two a day. I'm not one of them, but most authors, even when most authors can't write as quickly as I can write, to be fair, because they haven't been doing it as long. So a lot of them, it takes them 2 or 3 times longer to write a chapter than it takes me. So even if they're only doing one chapter or 2 chapters a day, they're still at work for 4 or 5 hours. And you want to tell this 23-year-old kid that they have to work 30 hours a week for nothing? Like that's not cool. you know? So, yeah, some people are I don't get very many rude ones though, I have to say. I think I've given that little mini lecture to about 4 or 5 readers in the past year. Most of my readers are super polite. And I think it helps that most of my readers are over 30. Because even when people aren't happy, most of them are recognize that I'm a real person and deal with me like I'm a real person and not just a machine. But every so often you get somebody who's like, basically, who do you think you are? You should be, we've paid for this. You should do it. And I'm like, well, I am trying to do it, but can't do it for free because that would be a hobby and I can only do my hobbies in my spare time. And guess what? I don't have any spare time at all. But anyway, I've noticed people are a lot nicer in web novel and other apps. Good no. See, I haven't been on the other ones, so I don't know. Um, but what you're describing there, Astro, I hear that a lot on the male lead side in web novel. The readers are like trolls. They're terrible. They're like telling authors to kill themselves and there's one author who was updating 6 chapters a day. So that was 6 or 7,000 words, 7,500 words a day on one book. And he dropped to 3 because he was killing himself. I mean, like, metaphorically. And he got so much hate for dropping to 3 chapters a day on one book. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, who do these people, do they think he's a machine? Like 7 days a week he was doing this. And I know some top authors who have been around for a couple years who had to take months off because they were getting so much hate. Either people didn't like what they'd done with a character or didn't decided they didn't like their writing or whatever. And they would just come back day after day after day to tell them how horrible they were and how useless they were. And when it's a young person, that's really hard for their mental health and well-being. Like, it's really bad. So I know some authors, the reason you don't get a lot of interaction is because their comments got so toxic they stopped reading them. So, yeah, Sravanthi, I agree. If you don't like the writing, stop reading. I had one woman who has commented. She doesn't comment very often, but she comments about every 50 to 100 chapters. And from the beginning of King of Beasts, and I think the last comment was up in the 500 chapters, she talks about how annoying Elia is. And I'm like, if you don't like her, don't read the book. Like, it's really simple. She's not going to appeal to everybody. Like, just go find something else. Why do you keep coming back? I don't understand it. I mean, I understand it on a psychological level. Like, I understand how these people are fueled and stuff. But I just don't. To me, that would just drag me down. I'm going to go spend 15 minutes every day looking at something I hate. Why? Why would you bother? Like, there must be better things to do with your time. But anyway, I have it really good. I really do. You guys are wonderful to me, and it's just I feel really bad because I hear some of the horrible stories that some of the other authors are dealing with, and I have to just kind of stay quiet because it's so not the norm for me. Like, I do get the bad comments now and again, but they're really not common at all. So, yeah, Erica's like, I don't know if you guys ever saw that meme. I think it was around the time of the campaign, but it was like, this is Bill. Bill just read something on the internet that offended him. Bill turned off his computer and got on with his life. And then it's like, be like Bill. And I was like, yes, yes, exactly. Erica said, I started reading a book I didn't like and I just stopped reading. Yeah. Anyway, I think sometimes people get a little upset, especially if they aspire to be a writer themselves and they see somebody getting a lot of affirmation for something that they don't think is very good. I think for some people that's really hard and they don't respond very well to that. And I think some people just get a kick out of throwing a cat amongst the pigeons. So, keyboard warriors, yes. Yes, yeah, always so brave. Yeah, I always, because sometimes authors are like, man, I don't want to meet this person on the street. And I'm like, I bet if you met them on the street, they would barely meet your eye. They would barely speak to you. You would think they were just just nobody important at all because they would have zero courage when they're face to face. They're the only place they feel strong is where somebody can't actually see them. Anyway, I apologize, ladies, but I'm gonna have to get going. I can hear my son calling my name. Um, so thank you for coming and sharing this with me, this today, and also just in general, this experience. Um, don't forget, if you came in the last 20 minutes, if you sometime today go into the spoiler room for King of Beasts, in fact, I'll even post a link to it here. You can enter the draw for that awesome T-shirt, which is up further. Scroll up, and you'll find it. Go into spoilers. So, sometime today, before you go to sleep tonight, go into King of Beasts and either post what your favorite scene is and why, or if there's something in King of Beasts that resonated for you on a real level, like something that impacted your life, or at least just felt like you understood it because you knew it in real life. Go in, and that will be your entry in the spoilers room. And tomorrow morning, I'll get up and I'll have Alan select a winner because I said I'm going to have Alan do it because he doesn't know who anybody is. So he won't have favorites or anything. He'll just pick whatever he thinks is the nicest or whatever. So don't worry. You don't have to be a writer. Like he's not a writer. So he's not going to go, "Oh, that one was really well written." It's going to be the content that matters to him. So tell us something you like and why, and I'll have him select it, and you'll get that cool T-shirt. And thank you, and I love you all, and I'm so grateful for you, and I'm so grateful that you're still showing up here 3 months after this book finished. So you're making my day. So go to King of Beasts, and I will see you tomorrow or the next day or whenever. Bye.